Welcome to a new episode of XR and AI Spotlight, the show where we give the stage to creative technologists, entrepreneurs who are pushing the boundaries at the intersection between XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, and I'm here today with Markus Edgar Hormes. He is the co-founder of WorkPlayExperience, a German service innovation consultancy helping organizations of all sizes tackle complex business problems. He is the co-author of one of the top-selling books, This is Service Design Doing, and he has dived into how AI can augment the design process with a focus on emerging team dynamic and how this new tool can be used during workshop and design sprints effectively. Listen to this episode to learn how AI can be used in customer research.
In research, a lot of people now start using it to basically dig through a lot of
How to manage expectation when introducing AI as a tool.
they think it's traditional software.
What are the challenges when introducing AI to your team?
I think it starts with it's the different levels of experience that people have in the team.
And how to start exploring and scaling its usage.
And I think the first step into kind of what you want to try is take what we would call a AI enable process or project where you actually.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank the sponsor for today, Cognitive 3D, who made this episode possible. Cognitive 3D is an analytic platform to improve how organizations can analyze user behavior in VR and AR and turn the findings into actionable insight. Cognitive 3D has an handy SDK that integrates easily in Unity and Unreal. Data are collected and displayed in 3D contextually to help you improve user engagement and retention. Whether you are designing training or simulation, running consumer research, or creating games and entertainment content, Cognitive 3D will change the way you track and learn from your data. Head to cognitive3d.com to learn more. And now, let's roll the title and welcome Markus on stage. Markus, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome.
That's great. And we saw each other not so long ago, indeed, in a session when we started merging technology and design and service design. And before doing that, though, I want to ask you first, because this is really one of the focus of this conversation, is artificial intelligence. And more specifically, how have your design sprints since AI became mainstream changed?
Well, yes, they changed and they didn't because in some respects, the technology is there, but also it isn't. So it's really interesting. So we used, of course, as soon as stuff popped up, and I think this goes already back like 3 or 4 years, no, 2 or 3 years, when the GPT-2 model was released, we saw the advent of a lot of tools like marketing text generators, basically. And these marketing text generators, what they would do would, you give them a bit of a briefing and they write some advertisement for you, maybe a Facebook advertisement, a Google advertisement, or a piece of a blog post. And this was interesting for us because it helped us and helped the participants of all the projects that we're working with to quickly take an idea that they had a rough draft from and turn it into something that looked almost real in terms of text. So the high quality advertising text. So it was really nice to come up with some slogans because a lot of times people that you work with in organizations aren't copywriters. But they know what they want. So that gave them the opportunity to express themselves in a way they weren't able before. So also in service design, the advertisement is a great prototyping method to prototype the value of something that you came up with, and be it a service or a physical product. You just make, you fake an advertisement and you show it to people, say, and see what their reaction is. And I think that's where it all started. And so basically, we used that for a while. So it was just another tool in the toolbox because the tools were quite kind of limited. But it became way more interesting when OpenAI released GPT-3, especially the Chat GPT, and we could talk and we could hand over more tasks that were part of the design toolbox. And I think that's where we kind of started our Teaming with AI initiative. Because we felt, okay, we tried around these things. We started to build first experiments, because that's how we work, right? We don't want to think about things. We want to try things. So we started an initiative called Teaming with AI, where we just called up on people, say, hey, do you want to join in for a conference and talk about and try some experiments about how the AI might change the way we work in teams. And design thinking, service design, however you call that stuff, is only one part of that whole kind of equation, what's happening out there. But of course, that's what I'm interested in. And so, we run some stuff.
Yeah, and I want to go back to hand over some of our tasks to AI. So you have an extensive toolbox, a set of processes that you follow during your design and ideation sprints. What are the tasks that you start handing over to AI?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question. So I think if we look at it from today we see lots of practitioners and colleagues hand over kind of several tasks around the activity groups of research, ideation, or prototyping, and some implementation parts already. I touched on the implementation bits, when you have to create an advertisement slogan, that, maybe that's helpful, or maybe it's even good enough. So, but most of the time, it's not about writing a line of text. In research, a lot of people now start using it to basically dig through a lot of source material. Source material in terms of lots of interview transcripts. So they use tools like Whisper to transcribe these things. But again, this is a nice tool. Previously, we had our headphones on for hours and would type all this stuff up. Now, thankfully, someone take this away from us, and we can concentrate on what's more important. Digging through the content and understanding what the pains are that are being mentioned, what we can read in between the lines. And even there, we find surprising good help by ChatGPT and the other LLMs, certainly available, in finding patterns across different interviews. See, what are the pain points that people are talking about or are mentioning. And if you prompt for that, it helps you get an overview. And I think there is always a reaction there, because people say, no, I can't do all this. Yeah, but does it have to? It might take us a bit of the way. And the question is always, when I prompt for these things, is then how do I treat that list? Do I treat that list as an inspiration, or do I expect this list to be perfect? And if you think that list is perfect, then you're going to be disappointed, because it isn't.
True. And I would argue, would a list made by a human be perfect?
Exactly. This is the thing, and this brings us to a really interesting talking point. We're bouncing back and forth in this conversation. So, dear listeners, sorry about that. But this is an expectation that we found in some of the design sprints we did with AI, and also in the unconference part, is that people have different expectations towards AI software. Then they had to traditional software, or they think it's traditional software, and this is a wrong expectation as well. So why is that? So the first thing is, previously we could turn to the software developer and say, what can this software do? You design that software like Word, and it's like it's a word processor. This is how you make bold language. You make something bold, and this is how you create a heading and stuff. But in the LLM, the engineers, they and researchers, they trained these models, and they can't even tell you. Can tell you what they did, and now it's over to you, and it's saying, yeah, and now figure out what it can do. We don't know perfectly. So we tried it with some stuff, but it might be useful for other things as well. So we can't ask them. So that's a first problem. So we have to explore what it can do. And very often people expected computers to be precise. And now the output of LLMs is the other way. Actually, we become the ones that have to check these results and take it with a grain of salt. Previously, it was, I do a calculation with a computer that was precise. It was more precise than we could do. So here it's the other way around. Sometimes it might be, and that's a lot of people figured this out, is kind of, if people work with the first time with these LLMs, then specifically you need to give them that explanation, because otherwise the expectation drives them nuts. They see something and say, oh, that's not useful. That's not what I expect. It's not a perfect answer. No. Okay. Imagine this was an assistant, a junior assistant in a certain field. And then, this is what you can, and it can be a bit random, because the guy is a bit, don't know.
All over the place.
All over the place. But he knows a lot, or she knows a lot, or it knows a lot, whatever it is. And that helps people sometimes get rid of their preconceptions, and that is hitting you when you personally start using these tools. But it also hits you even harder when you work as a team together with these tools, because then everybody needs to be more or less on the same page. Because otherwise, you won't figure out what this thing can do for you and your project.
Yeah, and I want to go there in 1 second about how the importance and what are some of these emerging dynamics within team. But though we have said about something that AI was great for, I was curious if there was something where you felt like AI miserably failed and you hope it would do good, but instead while implementing on a sprint, I was like, no, this is really not working. Was there a time?
Yes, of course. One example is because it did too good and we weren't prepared for it. Again, it's a what do I expect, and the results aren't as we expect them, and we're not adjusting for it yet. So we were trying to create kind of a stakeholder analysis for a project, and it'd be like, for the sake of the example, you talk about smart home. So smart home is fantastic. You have these devices in your home, and then you have the brands that build these devices or sell you these devices. Then you have all the people that make the systems that power them and run them in the background, that do the data processing, and then you have the whole supply chain going back to kind of where you dig for the rare earths that go into the chips, right? And on the other side, you might have, they're all trashing this thing, recycling it, and hopefully closing the loop. So we're 5 of us, and every one of us asked their own kind of GPTs to come up with lists. And everyone brought like 20 to 40 stakeholders to the table within a minute. Mm-hmm. And then we were overwhelmed. We were like, whoa, right? And every list was slightly different. And
right.
So we're like, okay, this is not how this works well.
Right. So
we just thought, hey,
it overperformed.
It overperformed in a way that overwhelmed us. The normal process is, we all just, brainstorm, ideate what could be stakeholders. We put them on the table. We have small conversations. But now these lists are being generated by ChatGPT. You just ask it, and it gives you a good enough list to start from. The problem is, it is now on the screen, right? This is like someone just handing you a book with all the information, but you haven't read it and you haven't understood it. And so the first big learning was that, the whole kind of system, they mess with the way we work and understand things. We still need to understand, but now suddenly we're on the slow side. Because previously, the ideation helped us to kind of think through things and then, get used to the ideas and say, oh, okay, this inspires me to something else. You make connections. So when someone else adds to it, they add to your already mental model that you've built up. So it's easier to have a conversation. And over time, also, there starts to be a bit of an alignment, what we talk about. So we start to align on a shared language, how we want to talk about, in this case, kind of smart home appliances, how we want to label things and who needs to be on that picture, in that picture, and who shouldn't. And with 40, I think we had 100 stakeholder list, and this kind of, no, okay, we can't work like this.
And this is actually something directly related with working with AI as a team. Because if you were an individual, you would probably generate a list. As an individual, you would go through this list and make sense of it. But the fact that this was coming up from a team activity, that is what multiplied that effect. So beyond this, what do you think are the challenges of using AI as a team, as part of a design process?
There are a few. So I think it starts with the first, it's the different levels of experience that people have in the team about AI. Some people, I go in a room and ask, okay, who has used ChatGPT? And then, almost everybody raises their hands. Then I ask, who has used ChatGPT in a real world problem, right? And yeah, it's real world that you write a story for your daughter, but
it's a professional, let's say,
in a professional context. And then a few hands go down, and then I ask kind of who has used the paid version of ChatGPT, and then you see suddenly it's only 20% in the room that has done that. So, and this is interesting because the ChatGPT 4 is such a big step up from the free version.
It
allows you. It is. It's massive. You can add files to it. You can ask a description from pictures. You can feed it way more content. It's more concise, and actually, if you prompt it right, it gives much better results. I use GPT-3 for ideation, but for more analysis tasks, I would always kind of revert. I'm lazy there as well. I just don't want to figure out with the old model. But this is the thing, right? A lot of people have used these tools, but they have only dabbled with them, and they found, okay, it's not working for me. Maybe it's not working for the stuff that I'm doing. But I think so. The first thing is, in teams, we need to have a certain level of exposure and education. And that this right now, there is now some resources on the web that you can find. There is maybe first books about this, but there isn't so much material. It really is in using these things. So everybody should have 10 hours of actually working with LLMs on real problems that they need solving professionally. Because otherwise they won't figure out, where the areas are where it's useful and where the areas are where it's not useful. And that brings me to my second point. As a team, so that we found that this is the most important thing, is that you need to figure this out as a team. So the research, there's first research coming out that actually says, okay, for each domain that you're in each industry, LLMs might be solving different kinds of problems, or the break-off point where, the AI is useful versus, okay, this is too complex of a problem. We this is where the humans have to jump in, is somewhere else. And this is a team task. So that's why we sometimes say never prompt alone, right? And this is actually for learning where these tools are useful. And where is that frontier, as they call it? I think jagged frontier in AI is, where's that frontier beyond which we shouldn't trust the AI? And then the high-performing teams seem to be the ones that can switch back and forth between oh, I need to do this myself. I need to break it down, and then I feed these tasks to the AI, who know where these breaking off points are, and so they can switch.
And you're saying that this is a
working.
team decision.
Not a team decision, but it's a team learning process.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it useful for us and our domain? And that, because again, each one of us is biased. I love to have triangulation in there, so to bring in different perspectives, because there is a gray area in these answers, specifically if you go to the more qualitative side of things. And that's what we're working a lot in. If you look at, circling back to design, in research, what do? You try to find common problems within interviews. You might actually come up with a first draft of a interview guideline, and then you have to maybe do the interview yourself and update it and see, okay, where is this taking me? But you also might do a first run through of the whole interview with a kind of fake user, just to get a feel for, am I asking the right questions? Don't take this as data, but then use the refined research guide to go out and collect data and then process that stuff. In ideation, it's a perfect ideation partner, right? If you prompt it into different directions, you can traverse the latent space of AI. It's fantastic. You just have a lot of fun with that, and that's where. Then again, the interesting part is, how do I select the ones that the ideas that I would like to look deeper into, and get a feel for what might be the complexities of making these things real. And that's where we kind of cross the line between ideation and prototyping, where you use LLMs to build quick prototypes, or give you a concept sketch of how would I implement, what are different ways to implement that stuff. So it's in service design we talk about the user experience, but every good user experience is also connected to the backstage processes within a company that need to work, and both needs to work. Otherwise, you don't have a business, and you don't have an initiative that works. And so these tools allow you to very quickly kind of go back and forth between ideas and solution space, and make a quick sketch of, if I want to build a restaurant or a service, I generate a couple of ads around what I think. I generate some processes, how it ties into my own organization, just to get a feel for where are the pain points, and then I can drill into this maybe with actual more research, and I talk to real people about this and embed this stuff. So,
but then, how do you think the role of a creator, of a designer, is going to evolve with AI?
Oh, very good question, because everything I just touched upon, someone in front, listening to this podcast will cringe and say, "Oh, no, they can't do this." And I've got good days when I say, "Yeah, my job is not in danger," and then in other days I think, "No, it will all be taken over by the machines," and just say "pretty please" on each prompt, because maybe they read all the transcripts later on. It's
you never know. ChatGPT is always great when
it's about our identity as as creators, as experts, as designers, as whoever we are. And what I see as a pattern around these things, I over the past year I talked to a lot of people about these topics, about AI, and every time it touches on the identity, it's very hard to tell whether people are protecting themselves, but they're trying not to go there because it might be too hurtful or frightening, because where does it leave me? Or if they really think this is, they have the experience, they looked at the systems and they said, no, I'm in a niche where I haven't seen a system actually contribute meaningfully.
Mm-hmm.
And the work will change, and it always has changed. Tools have changed that have changed our professions, And now we have a tool that will change lots and lots and lots of professions. And
Yeah,
we
and
have to
that's, I
figure,
mean, honestly,
and I
regardless
think
of
we
how
have,
people are gonna feel about it, this will change, right? So that's not something that is gonna affect how people will change. That is more of an emotional response. So if I'm let's look at the designer, the creators, right? First, now that you have a junior assistant any moment that is accessible, how would their role evolve, change, or what skill set would they need to develop in order to become more successful?
that's good. I, I think the first impact I would like to point out is as soon as you have that kind of um, herd of assistants, right, at your fingertips, how does it change the team composition that you put together to get something done? And this is an opportunity as it is maybe a danger. And I talk about these two. Let's talk about the opportunity first. So the first thing is that, everybody has been on projects, or a lot of people have been on projects where you wait for an expert to help you out on some stuff. In the corporate world, very often it might be the legal team. Lots of people have lots of questions for them. They're washed under, and you're lucky if you get an answer in 2 weeks. Yeah. And until then, this issue is on hold. Right? Now, I have maybe a junior legal assistant that can give me an indication
Good
where
enough,
this might be going. That is
maybe.
good enough, right? This is good enough to say, okay, I can park the more important thing, for the expert. But for now, I rely at least on this. And with rely, I mean I'm aware that it's just an indication and I still need to get that sign off, but I know the direction, I have a sense of the direction, and let's go. So it doesn't hold me off. So I might actually reduce the load to that legal team. And there's a chance for that legal team, of course, to kind of build their own system that is trained on whatever industry you're in, and that whatever question they get a lot, to actually offer these systems that are officially sanctioned inside corporations. So they might reduce their load and jump in where it's really necessary and where they're in there for the big picture. So this is one thing.
I just wanted to have a quick break to remind you that the recording of these episodes and many more great conversations with incredible experts are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just head over to my profile or the episode description, open up the link in bio, and pick your platform of choice. And now, let's get back to the show.
The other thing is, that means our teams can also get smaller. So we might not need all the skill set, but because we have these AI assistants that give us good enough contributions, we can build something. So what are the core things that you need to have on the team? And some of the other things that are more peripheral, you draw them in using AI. That means we expect our teams to get smaller and faster. That has, again, some implications, because that also means if you give them more skills, they need more freedom and they need the space to move. So they
Wait a
need
second.
to
Can
be
you
allowed
explain
to
me
be more
this? Why
Yeah.
why you are saying more skills means more freedom?
It requires more freedom because you can move faster and you can go further than the team could go before. Because before, I need to involve leadership here, and I need to involve legal here. I need to involve these guys here. So these are our normal checkups by the organizations that these teams live in.
Right.
And that usually also means that allows them to control where the team goes. Now that the team can do a lot of these things by themselves and much faster, they iterate much faster, they move much faster, and they possibly move further with less interaction within the company. And that is maybe good. It is
So
also,
this brings me to another point, right? Because we have talked about the role of the creators, the creatives, the designers, but then how would, for example, middle management or more senior leadership should address this from their perspective, when you have a team with much more power, they can go much faster. But that is always not always something that senior leadership understand or embrace.
Depends who you talk to. Again,
Mhm.
it's kind of what is the role of leadership is to create these spaces that people can, like these teams can thrive in.
Mm.
Leadership as setting goalposts to say, this is the direction we want to take. That might be backed by research or your trends and strategy. But setting these strategic goals and creating this environment where people are enabled through leadership. It's not what I think. I mean, but this is not just AI, but there's different other approaches that kind of challenge the traditional decision maker.
Of course, of course. I mean,
Because
the whole
management is not
design sprint, the whole
yeah,
design sprint per se, kind of like challenges that, because we are here with less boundaries, and then
yeah,
the fact is that AI might just enhance or amplify that dynamic.
yeah. But there is a lot of space. I mean, the more I
Mhm.
work in this space, the more space for leadership I see. But it's a different kind of leadership. It's about
Okay.
inspiring people. It's about taking them
Mhm.
with you into a certain direction, but it's not one direction. So it's a direction that gives people the space to also express themselves along the way.
That is very interesting. I mean, I think that very often we think about leadership as someone that leads in a direction. No, it's someone that create the space and then let the team craft the direction, because those are, let's say, the expert, the creatives, the people that know. And leadership, it's indeed.
Yeah, maybe.
No, I mean,
I think
if you disagree, you can
it's
totally.
no, I don't disagree. I think you will see many expressions of this, and depending on the industry you're in, depending on what topic it is, maybe there is people that have a vision of the future and they want to go there, but then again, we also know from research that having a single vision is not always successful. So you need to take people
Mhm.
along, and also you need to adapt a lot. So the most successful teams and companies are the ones that actually change and adapt to the realities around them.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing. How can we use that technology to adapt to reality faster? And I think
Yeah.
then we're maybe on a positive.
Note. And look, one thing I was thinking about is, so let's imagine you now have the tools, you have the team, you got the space, and let's say, okay, now we need to try something new, something different. We want to start implementing some of these into our processes. So, which one do you start with as a team? I mean, do you try to kind of like optimize something you're having? Are you trying to reinvent from scratch something you were not doing
That's a good.
before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that cuts down to a two-part answer. I'm not sure if I working through my lists there and checking them off. But the first one is what you want at the beginning. This technology is rather new, even if it isn't in some way. But if it's new for you, you need some space to try out things. So, what is your safe space? What is your playground? Remember that there's a nice picture that my colleague Adam Lawrence always uses. It's kind of, what is a playground? It's kind of, it has a clear boundary to the outside world. Within that boundary, you can do things that you wouldn't do outside safely, right? There is
Mhm.
a swing, but there is also a soft floor. So where's that safe space where you can try out different processes, where you can try out tools without compromising maybe the privacy or the data that you have from your customers, or where you do not mess up kind of the rest of the company just yet, but where we can learn. So there's an emphasis on learning, and this can be a safe space outside the company when you kind of take part in hackathons or in design jams, as we do them at the Service Design Jam. Um, or it's inside the company where you said, okay, we want people to be exposed to that technology, but please, here is the server infrastructure. If you want to play around with this, we just reserve it for this and this kind of projects where our legal team double checked everything, and you can safely do things here. Or just give people time and resources to play with these things, and play, in a of course more intentional way, as play as in learning. So, but do it with real projects, with real problems, because otherwise it's just, people don't take it too seriously. And we need to have that exposure, maybe do a feasibility project where people actually take some problem inside the company and tackle it with AI. Because in these first projects, you will have to learn how that impacts your team dynamic, how that impacts the processes. Because, I think the first step into kind of what you want to try is take what we would call a AI-enabled process or project, where you actually structure your project as you always done, and you use AI tools at several of the steps that are applicable. So where you would use and do an interview, you do the interview or prepare the interview with the help of AI, you analyze the interview with the help of AI, you prototype with the help of AI. And then after you've been through a couple of those, you will also realize that maybe we have the chance to rethink everything AI first. And then it's about, maybe some of these old ways of working are not necessary anymore. Maybe some of these things are good enough. We just hand them over to the AI, or they're so fast that we squeeze in a completely different structure. Because, technically, this was one of the early prototypes that I think Microsoft published, or John Maeda presented in his role of head of design in AI, was how can you kind of do a design thinking loop in a minute using ChatGPT. And so basically, it allows you to, you get a briefing. Okay, let's play it through completely in the box, to get a sense where this is going. And so, and you do this within minutes. You take the briefing, you ask, you come up with some research questions, you get a sense for the research approach. So you let ChatGPT come up with a research approach. Then you do a couple of fake interviews. You list some pain points. Then you plug these pain points into an ideation prompt, and get some ideation and build some prototypes, and double check. Okay, what are the new questions that you have? So and you do this within a couple of minutes. This is not suggesting that you do that to deliver that project. This is for you to prepare that project. And you basically do that iteration before you might even go to the briefing meeting.
Right.
And there you ask much better questions. So and the other thing is,
so what you are saying is that there is this AI first approach that could be used as a preparatory step for the actual project. So this is an example of how, because then there are no stakes, it's more for you to learn, and it can be done in five minutes, let's say, and then you're better prepared to address, right, that makes sense that it will go that way.
Yeah, and it's a translation machine, right? LLMs translate, so it might help you actually understand your customers better, your clients better. It might help you understand the briefing better. And then the interesting parallel we found was that if you look at there's research on how designers think, what the cognitive structures are. They're done through protocol studies where you ask experienced designers to basically say out loud what they're thinking as they go through solving a problem. And they did these studies with experienced designers and designers that just left university. And what they found is that there is a difference. And the difference is that a experienced designer has the ability to go from problem space into solution space and back within, very fluidly back and forth without becoming attached to the solutions. But while the junior designers struggle with this yet, they have to practice this more. So they stay firmly into problem space, and then they ask good questions. So it's useful, but the experienced ones go back and forth, and that informs their questions. So now with these machines, they mimic that kind of behavior, or they allow us to support that behavior if we know that we're maybe not so strong in that. So it allows us to go into solution space, see what other questions we could ask right now, and bring this back maybe in an interview session or in our briefing already, and say, okay, these are some directions this could take. Where are the limitations? Where do we want to go? Where don't we want to go? What are the questions we need to ask? So we don't do this, kind of 2-3 weeks of interviews, then a couple of weeks of analysis, and then we build prototypes, and then we test these prototypes and come up with new questions 4 weeks later. We get a better sense of the holistic picture, what we need to address much earlier on, and that gives us a navigational instrument, I think, for our projects.
And I mean, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, because I've got the chance to read through the white paper that you guys are about to publish about teaming with AI, and it was like a lot of things that makes you think, and you need to really put down the paper and start thinking. Right, there are different ways. There is another interesting concept, for example, how becoming from creators to curators.
Oh yeah.
That was another very interesting concept, and much more. And I suggest everybody here listening to stay tuned, follow Markus, and follow me, because I'm certainly going to talk about it when it comes out, because I think it's going to be very valuable. So stay tuned for that. But I know that you, Markus, are also very passionate overall about how technology overall can support the creative, the design process, and of course AI being one. And then we met through the XR bridge, so to say, right? So I'm curious also to hear, as kind of like while we wrap up, how do you think instead AI and XR can both separately or maybe synergistically support the design process?
That's a very good question. I've been thinking about this, and I mean, there are two emergent technologies. Well, one of them is emerging more like a spring flood, I think. The XR has a potential to kind of bring out the strong points in AI. So I think a couple of years into the future, right? We can actually talk to our AI machines. Right now, we have to type or upload some stuff, but this will get faster and become more of a natural conversation. And one of the things I feel are important is that we can capture what we talked about and what we worked on with AI. And this is the current systems are quite limited in that, in the sense of, it's kind of, let's work on a customer journey, or let's work on a movie, or let's work on what we in design call a boundary object. So something that kind of visualizes the system that we're designing, or a prototype. And if we can just talk, and the system can say, okay, now let's talk about redesigning that city square. Okay, I want the houses over there to disappear, and maybe because they're old and already substance has gone, and now let's bring them back with a twist,
different style, maybe.
Different style. Give them a pink roof, don't know, or turn them into something Christmassy or Eastery or whatever.
Commercial space, for example.
Space, or a museum, and actually, by describing that, so we see the first research projects in this space where people work on kind of using natural language interfaces to kind of create 3D objects or architecture, and then I can do these things. And this is where we need the XR space, because I think these are the tools that help us to put ourselves now not in front of a chat interface with some pictures, but we put ourselves into the real world and say, okay, this is what we want to change. And this is why football metaphor coming back. It's like, this is why Mourinho used to be a really good coach. One of the things that he did was he would not talk tactics with his players in the tactics room. He would place them on the pitch and talk it through, so they experience how it, what it means eventually. And this is something that I'm also feel very strongly about. And that's why prototyping and strategic prototyping for me is so important, is we can talk about things so often, right? And you hear something else than I want to say because we just use words.
Yeah.
But in the moment I built that interface that I've been envisioning, and you look at it and you say, Markus, that's not how I thought this would be. I thought it differently. And you move some boxes and, you kind of stuff like that. And with customer experience, it's even worse, because we've got so many different layers to it of these experiences. So we have the, beyond the digital interfaces, to mostly 2D these days, we have the whole real world. We have the stage, the shop environment, the way you've been treated by the people that stand in front of you. All these things. How can we get as close as possible into that situation, maybe without having to be there, because that's not practical. And that's where XR comes in. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that one of the great challenges of this is that when people expect to go into a virtual environment, they always expect a one-on-one representation of reality on so many different layers. And I think that the teams that will be able to have the right level of abstraction so that they can access this tool, they can access this communication. At the end, this becomes a communication tool. It doesn't even become a creation tool, right? Because it allows to understand, align each other. And if those people that will understand that a lower level of visual fidelity per se doesn't impair communication, but it's just a way to get faster and to align faster and to communicate faster and more effectively, those are the one that I think gonna take the most advantage. And those are the one that earlier on will be able to use this tool, because they will not need to have perfect interaction in the world. They will not need to have perfect visual fidelity of how that desk is going to look like, because it is a desk. It doesn't matter how it looks. There is a table, that is a straight flat surface, and that's everything I need. So I think that this is really key for to find the right balance.
Yeah. I think this is, so what you're describing is what we have in theater, which is one of our favorite kind of tool sets when it comes to prototyping interactions. And that is that the rehearsal room often is a black room with black floor, black ceiling, and actors just come in there. And you can be anyone, and you can be, you can imagine anything in there. It's like a canvas. And I think if we have this virtual canvas, this virtual space, we can really play a lot of things that we can't play in a workshop room. So one of the things I mentioned this earlier. Just hang on, I've got a interesting technical problem. It's like MS Teams is trying to get my attention without it actually being active. Okay, so as I explained earlier, right, sometimes you get overwhelmed by all the information input that you have. And now imagine that you're doing a design project where you talk to 20, 30 people, and you have maybe photos and videos of them using your products, or you using the services. You have videos of them doing sports. You have the whole interview transcripts and everything. Where do you place that? We built kind of research walls and trying to make sense of these. Yeah. And now in virtual space, we have unlimited space, just like as we have now on the Miro whiteboards. But we can tap into that experience again and empathize with that moment. We can, if you've been a researcher and you've been out there talking to these people, you can go back into that situation, and that supports your cognition in a way that we that otherwise we would have to go back to these places, which wasn't possible. And that allows us to get closer to reality. And again, with an interface that is being moderated by AI, that allows us to actually make sense of these things and process a lot of these massive amounts of information that was super hard for humans to do before. Of course, I'm very optimistic about all these things, but there are also dark sides to this, and we need to be very, very careful to manage them as well. So learning means also look at the opportunities, but also look at the problems that pop up.
I think a lot of those, and I think a lot of those are indeed, some of these red flags are very well highlighted in this white paper, actually, Markus. So, and I think it's not just about flag them, but how do you address them? So again, I encourage everybody to give that a look. And Markus, I really wanted to thank you very much for this great talk, and I look forward to see how these move forward, and hear again from you how you have used AI and other technologies in your design process, because I really believe that human creativity, and especially as a team, can really be enhanced. It's just about finding the right way.
Right now, I think the biggest tip I can give to anyone: pick a project, maybe a couple of hours project, little task, and in your team intentionally design, okay, how do we want to tackle this using AI? At certain points, not for everything, but let's try this and make this intentional. So set yourself a goal, then you do it, and then reflect what happened, what worked, what didn't work. Because one of the really interesting thing is right now, because everything's so new and the systems are changing almost every day, it's not very clear if it just doesn't work that way, or if we still need to learn how to make it work.
You haven't put enough effort. Let's say.
So smaller steps, more experiments. Let's learn. Let's see how much we can push that, how much we should push that, and where we should be careful. And always kind of think about this holistically. It's not just did it get the job done, but yes, it's faster, but what are the costs? So what are we not doing anymore? Maybe that was important for us to understand. I touched on the cognition. As soon as you don't spend 15 minutes ideating, where do you put in that space, that time, so you understand the concept that's just have been generated, stuff like that. Smaller steps.
Markus, I couldn't have ended on a better note and a more, let's say, valuable. So thank you very much, Markus, for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me again.
It was a real pleasure. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you really much for listening in. And remember to head to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and check out more insightful conversation revolving around XR and AI. And if you really like the show, please leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlight on the latest and greatest advancement in XR and AI. Till next time.